I'm no tech genius, but I knew if I wanted my business to crush it, I needed a website now. Thankfully, Bluehost made it easy. I customized, optimized, and monetized everything exactly how I wanted with AI. In minutes, my site was up. I couldn't believe it. The search engine tools even helped me get more site visitors. Whatever your passion project is, you can set it up with Bluehost. With their 30-day money-back guarantee, what have you got to lose? Head to Bluehost.com to start now.
Ambition is neutral, natural. It's for all of us, and it's ours for the taking. So many of us, like women, people of color, people with disabilities, the queer community, we experience an ambition penalty, right? We're often told that our ambition isn't polite and it's aggressive or whatever it is, right? And so I just want to invite you to come back to the conversation, to make it neutral and natural for you and find your way in it. And if it doesn't look like what we've seen in the world, brava, because like it needs to look different because so much of what we've seen is dysfunctional. But I really hope that you will find your way in it and that you do feel like anything is possible with your ambition when it's coming from that place of purpose and wholeness.
You're listening to Make Some Noise podcast, episode number 680 with guest Amina AlTai.
Welcome to Make Some Noise podcast, your guide for strategies, tools, and insight to empower yourself. I'm your host, Andrea Owen, global speaker, entrepreneur, life coach since 2007, and author of 3 books that have been translated into 18 languages and are available in 22 countries. Each week, I'll bring you a guest or a lesson that will help you maximize unshakable confidence, master resilience, and make some noise in your life. You ready? Let's go.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the podcast. I am so glad that you're here. So today, when you're hearing my voice, this voice that you've probably heard maybe many times on the podcast or on social media, or maybe you've been a client of mine and even heard my voice. Today, you are hearing my voice for the first time after I am back from a week-long journey to Costa Rica, where I participated in 4 ayahuasca ceremonies with a wellness retreat called Rhythmia. To say that it was life-changing is a vast understatement. I do not use that expression unless I absolutely mean it, because there are so many different modalities and ways to grow and heal in the personal growth industry. I am very careful about how I talk about things, especially how I talk about the takeaways. I never want to try to sell something that I can't fully get behind and tell you about it from my experience. I had been thinking about doing ayahuasca since 2020, but as a person in long-term recovery, anytime I'm going to participate in, especially a very strong hallucinogenic, I had to be very careful and thoughtful about my intentions, about everything around it. It took me some years to get there, 5 years to get there. And it was very serendipitous how it all happened, how I ended up there. And so I'm back. I'm back in the States. I'm back in North Carolina after a week-long trip at the most beautiful place. And I'm going to be talking about it in one future episode. I haven't decided. It might even be next week, but I'm going to go into much more detail and more depth on a private podcast series that I have. It's free. It's not behind a paywall. I've already recorded some ketamine sessions over there. And so my commitment is to get caught up on that podcast series by next week. And you can get those episodes if you go to AndreaOwen.com/journey. And of course, that link will be in the show notes, AndreaOwen.com/journey. As I mentioned, the first several episodes in that series are about ketamine therapy. And then I'm going to record some about the week that I had last week. And I'm hoping also to have somebody come on, their main head doctor, to talk about the safety of it and what actually happens to our brain, because that's very important. Anyway, I feel like a changed human. I feel like a different person sitting here at my desk talking into this microphone, the same microphone that I've talked into hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times to you. And today I come to you feeling very changed, absolutely for the better. So I highly encourage you to listen into that particular series where I go into more depth. Even if you have no plans to do it, I think you would find it interesting about my experience. And especially if you are interested in embarking on something like that, I think it can be really helpful to see someone else's journey, why I went in the order that I did. I'll tell you about the psychedelics that I have not participated in and if I plan on doing those in the future. And as I record this and I look at the clock, it's 11:11 a.m. So I'm going to wrap this part up and get on with telling you about our guest for today. Amina AlTai is here and I absolutely loved her energy. She's so enthusiastic and fun and lively, and her work is incredibly important. Her story is amazing too. So you'll hear a little bit about that. But for those of you that don't know her, Amina AlTai is a holistic business and career coach, proud immigrant and chronic illness advocate. A leading coach to notable leaders, executives, and founders, Amina's mastery is connecting us to our brilliance, teaching us to live and lead from it each day. So without further ado, here is Amina. Amina, thank you so much for being here. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so delighted.
It's so funny because as we're recording this, I just recorded another interview with a woman who talks about like the masculine, feminine, and like leaning into your feminine. And now now we're here talking about ambition. But before anybody prejudges, including myself, let's jump into the questions because I'll start by saying like, I am an ambitious lady. It came out of the womb that way. And so I love that you describe ambition as a desire to grow, not necessarily like, have a business or climb the corporate ladder type of ambition. So how can we differentiate between ambition that's rooted in purpose? Like I would love to start here. Ambition that's rooted in purpose versus ambition that's driven by societal expectations or family expectations, or even by like wanting to be accepted and things like that. I think sometimes that's tricky for people. So can we start there?
Yes. And I love that you started with the definition of ambition because I actually felt like it was super important to redefine it, because when I was socializing the conversation as I was writing the book, people kind of fell into two camps. They were like me or you, where they're like, yes, I'm ambitious. I came out of the womb this way. Or they were like, I am not ambitious at all. I fully reject that word. It is a dirty word. I think it's a dirty word for some people because of the way that it's been portrayed, right? We kind of live in this society where ambition is taught to us as more for more's sake all the time, but that leads us to burnout, that upholds oppressive systems. And so many of us were like, no, if ambition looks like that, I don't want it, which is why I wanted us to redefine it. And so in the book, I talk about two types. There's purposeful ambition and painful ambition. And I can tell you about both.
Yes, please. I like a good like differentiation because like you said, we, especially like words in the self-help field, like we just assume that everybody thinks that it's the same that we think it is.
Right, exactly. And so I came up with this nomenclature because I didn't want to also make it right or wrong, right? So I didn't want to say healthy ambition versus unhealthy ambition. Painful ambition is ambition that is driven by our core wounds. So there are 5 core wounds. We each have 1, 2, 3, or all 5, depending on our experience. Yeah. So they are abandonment, rejection, humiliation, betrayal, and injustice.
Okay.
And for each wound, we wear a corresponding mask. So, for example, with the rejection wound, the mask we wear is avoidance. For the betrayal wound, the mask we wear is control. And you can imagine if our ambition is coming from either that wound or that mask, it's going to be a little wobbly.
Yeah.
And so the invitation is to look at the core wound, do some work around that, and then eventually pivot into purposeful ambition, where our ambition is coming from a place of truth, a place of wholeness, instead of that pain and that striving and that external validation.
Okay. What are we doing when our wound is abandonment? Because I think a lot of people like their ears perked up when they heard that, me included.
And oftentimes abandonment and rejection go hand in hand, not always, but sometimes. So when we have the abandonment wound, the mask we wear is dependence. So we might feel overly dependent on people around us. We might find ourselves in codependent relationships. We feel like we need other people in order to cope and survive. And not in like a healthy interconnected way, but more in that overly dependent way.
Okay. So like anxious attachment style, people might
100%.
relate to that. Okay. You said that how you like to talk about ambition is from a purposeful place. Where does one even start to see if they are coming from that place?
Well, first of all, most of us aren't coming from that place.
I was thinking that, yeah.
I think it's important to say. And I think it's also really important that we like don't judge ourselves or weaponize a framework like this against ourselves, because we're kind of operating in a world that asks us to do this, right?
Yeah.
Like a hallmark of painful ambition is like, I need to win no matter the cost, right? Even if it's the risk of my own health.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with winning, but the no matter the cost piece is a little tricky, right? So I just want us to first and foremost, like have compassion for ourselves if we're coming from that place. And then in the book, what I talk about is like there's a 5-part framework that kind of upholds purposeful ambition. So it needs to be connected to our gifts, our zone of genius. We want to be connected to the impact that we want to have. We want to be values aligned. We need to have our needs met, and we want to be cultivating a sense of contentment. And when we're checking the boxes on those 5 things, we tend to live more in that purposeful ambition versus the painful.
Okay. I love, everybody loves a good framework.
Everyone loves a good framework. Give me some steps.
Yeah, give me step-by-step process. Yeah, that is always helpful. Although I know it can be a little more complicated and meandering in those steps. But you also talk about in the book about overworking and how, I mean, I think that most of the people listening here are probably overworking, and that can be a systemic issue, which I love talking about that. So what are some signs that someone is sort of caught in this cycle, and how can they break free from that?
Yeah. I think it's really important to talk about overworking as potentially a systemic and economic problem, because I don't know if you felt this way, but in the world of self-help, I've often felt like, oh my God, all these things are my fault. I've done something wrong.
And I can also do something myself to fix them.
Exactly. Right. So like we position overwork as like, oh, maybe you need some more mindfulness practices or performance hacks or another adaptogenic beverage and you'll be okay. Right.
A cold plunge.
Right, exactly. A cold plunge will solve your overworking issues. And listen, all of those things may be helpful in some ways. Right. But for the most part, most people stay overworking because of financial precarity, right? Like the gender wage gap is a great example of this. People have to work harder to make ends meet. And so it's not always an individual choice of like, we're not girl bossing, tech broing, right? It's because we need to make ends meet. And it's therefore leading us to an unhealthy place. And so I think we have to acknowledge it both as, maybe there's some stuff on our side of the street to look at if I do have that propensity to overwork. And that was my story of like, I was very much that person that was like, oh, my worth is tied to my output. Let me be hardworking. And also we have to acknowledge the systems that we're in.
My friend Kate Anthony she's a divorce coach. And so she talks a lot about this. And then I saw it too, when I suddenly became a single mom and was like, I work for myself and my earning potential is infinite because I do that. And at the same time, I am living a life now where I don't have anyone's help except my own. And I still have 2 kids and all these things. So I just am appreciative that you mentioned that. And it's not just a matter of, the answer is to stop overworking. You need to just rest more and delegate more and hire out and things like that. It's not that simple.
It's not. And, I really connect with what you're saying. I'm not a parent, but I did get divorced in the last year. And it's like, even as a single person, right? I don't have dependents, but like I live in a very expensive city. All of a sudden, all the bills that were split 2 ways are now one person's, right? And so then that can tip us in, especially if we have that propensity for overworking, it could tip us into that place. But I think it's part of a much broader conversation.
One of the things you talk about in your work is what you call living above the resentment line. So can you explain what that means and how it applies to our professional lives? Because I think resentment is a conversation that just doesn't happen enough.
Yes, I've actually started asking people in my relationships, I'm like, do you feel resentful? Does this make you feel resentful? And it's, I think, so freeing to have that conversation. Because I think a lot of the times too, especially, I don't know, like we're not monoliths, right? But for women, a lot of the qualities that are culturally co-signed are like, be nice, go the extra mile, do the thing. And we're resentful about those things. Mm-hmm. And so in the book, I talk about the resentment line, which is the space that if we live below it, we feel resentful. And this often comes up in the work conversation around salary and support, right? Are we being paid enough for the output that we're putting? Do we feel in right relationship with that? Do we have the right level of support, whether that's at home or at work? And when we don't have those things, when our needs aren't met, we feel resentful. And the funny thing is, and I'm curious how you feel about this too, is like, and I felt this way before, it's like, oh, nobody knows that I'm resentful, right? I'm overgiving and my needs aren't met, but I'm showing up with a smile on my face so nobody knows. Everybody knows. Everybody can feel our resentment. So we're not fooling anyone. We don't win and they don't win.
I think that some people pull it off more than others. I am someone who, in fact, I thought about being a newscaster for like in my younger years because I'm like, I feel like I could do that. I can put on a very professional voice and professional, like mannerisms and things like that. But my face will not hide. I'm so expressive and also my delivery. Here's the thing that like I've had to learn as feedback that I've received in my relationships is that they're like, the words that you're saying are fine. It's just your delivery and your tone. And like, when I tell you, I try so hard, it's like a bad actress when I try really hard to not to be nicer in my tone, but my resentment comes out as being passive aggressive. And I'm like, oh, it's fine. No, totally. It's fine. Just like a little bit sarcastic, but also like still not as obviously sarcastic and passive aggressive. Oof.
Yeah, I relate to that. I definitely relate to that. Because it's like, it's easier to say yes and to harbor the thing and then also to deal with the confrontation of maybe I'm not okay with this.
The uncomfortable conversation and then trying to compromise and all of that stuff. So yes. Ugh,
all
resentment.
That hard relational stuff.
I know. It's all this heavy lifting. Well, you also talk about what you call the 3 E's, which are excellence, energy, and ease, that are keys to identifying. And you mentioned it before, your inner genius, like your kind of zone of genius. So how can people use those 3 elements to align their careers with their true selves? Because I know I have some people listening who are like, I would love a career change, but feel like they don't even know where to start.
Yes. Okay. So in the book, I talk about the 3 E's, and this is how we kind of unearth our zone of genius. So the 3 E's are our zone of exceptional, our zone of excellence, and our zone, the space that we're average at. So each and every one of us has a zone of genius, something that we're like off the charts amazing at. And what was so cool when I did the research around this, because I noticed this with my clients, a lot of people would be like, there's nothing that I'm exceptional at. I'm not genius. And when I looked at the research, it's something like 90-something% of women believe that genius is a male trait. And even when you look at girls as young as 6, they think that genius is more for boys than it is for girls. And then you trace it all the way back to ancient Rome, and genius is always a hero and never a heroine. And so this was just so illuminating for me because I'd seen it with my clients. And now I'm looking at the research and I just see how so many of us just discount our gifts and our genius because we think that we can't have it, that it's for somebody other than us. And so this is such an important process to reclaim. And it doesn't have to happen overnight. I think that's the other scary thing too, right? It like feels like this huge form of privilege of like, well, how can I abandon my day job that's potentially outside of my zone of exceptional and like live into this thing that I don't even know that I can build a career around, right?
Yeah.
But Gay Hendricks, who wrote the book, The Big Leap, he says, just start by spending 10 minutes a day there. See if you can like understand what those gifts are and see if you can spend just 10 minutes a day there. And then after 10 minutes, move up to 15 and then 20. And then over time, you're eventually almost living in it, right? And so then it's more psychologically safe versus saying, I'm jumping off the cliff. I'm abandoning this job that I've built in my zone. And most of us can't do that.
The golden handcuffs. Yes. I recommend that book quite often, probably
Same.
more than any other book here on the podcast. It's a quick read. It's easy to digest, mostly because how he talks about the upper limit problem. But that zone of competence, man, like it will trap you in there. And that's the way he explains it. Well, you tell us, like, how does he explain the zone of competence versus the zone of excellence and genius?
So the zone of competence is the space that we're average at, right?
Yeah.
We perform on par with our peers. Our zone of excellence is the place that we're practiced, polished, and really proficient. So we're really good at it.
And that's usually where people like find a career.
100%.
Right? Somewhere between like competence and excellence.
100%. That's where most people live. And here's the rub. Our excellence usually supports somebody else's genius. So we often stay there because we're getting rewarded for it. The person whose genius it supports, they're telling us the words of affirmation to keep us staying there, right? But he has this one line in the book that like gets me every time where he says, many of us, like it feels like we're going to wither and die if we don't let the genius speak. And I think a lot of us know that moment where we're like, I know there's something inside of me that I just want to contribute to the world. And it feels like I may wither and die if I don't let it out. And so if you're hearing this today and you haven't let it out, this is your invitation.
I love that. Okay. We have to take a quick ad break. When we get back, I want to speak to that just a little bit more. We'll be right back. Did you know that when your metabolism is working properly, you'll feel the benefits in every part of your life? I've found a tool that's helped me tune into my body to make smarter decisions with my health. It's called Lumen. Lumen is the world's first handheld metabolic coach. It measures your metabolism through your breath. Yes, your breath. And tells you if you're burning fat or carbs. Then using the app, it gives you custom guidance to optimize your nutrition, workouts, sleep, and even stress management. Here's how it works. First thing in the morning, I breathe into my Lumen and it tells me what fuel my body's using. From there, I get a personalized nutrition plan for the day. And I can check in before or after meals or workouts to see how my body's responding in real time. It's like biofeedback, but actually useful. Why does this matter? Because your metabolism is your body's engine. When it's working well, everything improves. Energy, sleep, fitness results. Lumen even tracks your cycle and menopause shifts, which has been huge for me in keeping my energy steady and cravings in check. I love having a tool that's based on my body, not just generic advice. The warmer months are coming. Spring back into your health and fitness. Go to lumen.me/noise to get 10% off your Lumen. That's lumen.me/noise for 10% off your purchase. Thank you, Lumen, for sponsoring this episode. If you're a woman over 40 dealing with perimenopause, you don't have to accept it as just another part of aging. Did you know there are so many perimenopause symptoms? Hot flashes and night sweats, trouble sleeping, painful sex, vaginal dryness, and libido change, weight and body changes, brain fog and memory lapses, moodiness, anxiety and depression, period problems, hair and skin changes, joint pain, bone loss, and fracture risk. The experts at MIDI Health understand what you're experiencing and know how to help. MIDI clinicians are menopause experts dedicated to providing safe, effective, FDA-approved solutions. Visits and prescriptions are covered by major insurance providers, no membership fees or hidden costs. If you're uninsured or Medicare is out of network under your plan, they also offer affordable cash payment for services. I know for me, as I'm about to turn 50 in 2025, finding a doctor that specializes in perimenopause and menopause is incredibly important. You deserve to feel great. Book your virtual visit today at joinmidi.com. That's joinmidi.com.
Carla only. Whatever the occasion, effortless elegance is right this way. Because Hilton brings you new ways to stay courtesy of the Nomad London. And it doesn't stop at award-winning dining in a space draped in velvet and illuminated by vintage chandeliers. No, this day goes beyond with unparalleled personalized service and attentive hospitality. Oh, and did we mention the Nomad London can be booked using your Hilton Honors points at Hilton.com? Hilton, for this day.
Okay, so the zone of excellence thing, I see this a lot when people take my programs or they work with me one-on-one, or, they, even women that work with me, because I've been in recovery for 13 years and they get sober and they have like 6 months of sobriety and they're like, I want to quit my job and become a recovery life coach, or, something like that. And I always tell them, like, that's probably your zone of genius is somewhere in that. Like, maybe it doesn't have to be going for this particular career, but there's something in the elements of coaching, whether it's curiosity or the nurturing or the teaching. It could be that. Like, it could not even be coaching, or maybe it's consulting or whatever it is. And so I say all that to encourage people, like, when you find something that lights your soul on fire in the best way, and that you find that you're not only drawn towards, but brilliant at, like, do not let that go. Follow that thread.
Do not let that go. I agree. And then it just like catalyzes everything, right? It's like the way kind of parts for you in lots of ways when you're in that space.
It does. It does. And it's also can be really scary. So buckle
100%. I had a coach once when I was in my career transition, and she had said to me, she was like, if there's not a little pea coming down your leg, you're not on the growth edge.
Yes.
And I live by that.
I love that. I had a coach one time, this was years ago, and I said, I know I'm coaching with you because every time I have a conversation with you, I feel like I'm going to have diarrhea. Like at one point, like, so just that's a worse, more gross example. But yes,
So
like
real.
sometimes that's what it can look like. Well, I want to circle back to what we were talking about in the beginning around ambition and how we tend to grow up. We have a lot of Gen X and millennial women listening who grew up in a time where, we heard the feminist movement, which did amazing things, told us, like, you can be anything that you want and you can have it all. And then we kind of grew up and we're like, wait a minute, this is this is too much.
Yeah.
I can't. So I think
I leaned in, I want to lean out.
yeah, exactly. And so I think that ambition can become like this push pull of, oh, it's the thing we should have, but yet it's still kind of a dirty word. But you talk about it as an invitation, which I love that, an invitation to design our lives with greater purpose. So can you talk about like, how do you teach people or talk to people about shifting the perspective around the word in the first place for people who are kind of like really stuck in it being uncomfortable?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I was sitting with somebody on a podcast recently, and they were very much sort of like in that old definition of ambition. And we really had to keep going back to it and wrestling with it together. But I think sometimes there's a lot of shadow there for people, right? And so Jungian shadow, it's the parts of us that we feel like are unlovable. So we relegate them to the shadows, right? So we pretend that they don't exist. And then we create this over rotation in the other direction to throw people off the scent. So for some of us, I think there can be some shadow there. And if there is, we need to integrate that shadow. Also, when I start to take people through how I see ambition, then they start to understand it a little more. So, for example, I alluded to in the beginning of our conversation that we think culturally we've been told that ambition is more for more sake all the time. But I actually think that it is much more about cultivation, pacing, and replenishing. So it's much more like a perennial flower. I'll tell you what I mean.
Okay.
So it's like you have this seedling of desire that says, I want to grow in whatever area of your life that is. Maybe it's in parenting, maybe it's in work or in friendship. So you have this seedling of desire. You drop it into the ground. You take care of the inner and outer environment. So therefore the seed grows. It comes up through the ground. And then it has this like beautiful momentary peak in the sun where the petals come out and it's like miraculous. And then guess what? The seasons change and the petals fall off and it goes back underground, or maybe it just sits there and the ground is fallow until the conditions are right for it to rise again. And that's how I want us to think about ambition. Instead of always moving the goalpost and stretching ourselves beyond our limits in a way that is unkind for us and other people on the planet, that we think about this much more in cycles.
I love that because that points to the female and the feminine and how it's cyclical, and just like the moon has cycles and the seasons have cycles and our menstruation has cycles. And I'm always going to be a fan of that. And also just not having to push and push and push and push all the time. So I think that's what you're saying when you say like ambition for ambition's sake.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Well, which brings me to the conversation about burnout. Okay. And burnout is kind of a buzzword. I have several colleagues who do keynotes and train specifically around that topic. And it's a big topic in work culture, which I'm glad it is. So what strategies or tools do you have that you can recommend for people listening to prevent burnout while still pursuing if they have professional goals or even personal goals?
Yeah. Burnout is such a big topic. And this is sort of my origin story. I talk about this in the book, but I burned out in spectacular fashion and developed 2 autoimmune diseases. And I was like, but again, I was like, okay, this is a spiritual assignment. Well, hindsight, I'm like, it's a spiritual assignment because it helped
not
me
in the moment.
Right. In the moment, I was like, this is terrible. But it helped me create my curriculum. And so one of the things that I invite people to do is to design their work week around their bodies, right? So we all have different bodies. And something that inside of burnout that's really interesting is people that have uteruses and women, we have a higher propensity for burnout because of something called corticotropin factor. So we stay dysregulated longer and therefore can lead to greater numbers of burnout. And so it's just a one simple example about how we all have different bodies and we need to work with them and honor them in order to not get to that place. And so, for example, when I was writing the book, my brain is best at the beginning of the week and early in the day. So that's when I would write. And coaching is more of a zone of genius. It takes less energy and effort. So that was Wednesday, Thursday. And by the time Friday rolled around, I barely knew my name. So that's when I would do like admin stuff, right? So finding ways that we can work with our bodies instead of fighting them. And a lot of the times when I'll share this, people will be like, well, it's not possible in a corporate context. But I've worked with people that you can even find freedom inside of the framework or the structure that already exists. It might not look the same as it does for you or I, but there are ways to work with and honor our bodies versus fighting them.
Yeah.
But I actually want to learn from you because you are a parent and an entrepreneur and a podcast host. And so I'm super curious about how you manage that for yourself.
Well, I have a similar story to yours in that I've experienced like pretty decent bouts of burnout 3 times in my career, starting in like 2010 up until just a few years ago. I didn't know the first couple times it happened. I didn't realize what it was until people started talking about this. And I was like, oh, that's what that was when that happened. but it was more when my kids were littler. And my last pretty bad bout with burnout was I also got diagnosed with an autoimmune, but it took 18 months to get diagnosed. I was told it was depression and perimenopause. I was put on an antidepressant that didn't work, then was told I was treatment resistant. Through all of that, in hindsight, like you mentioned, I realized that I wasn't listening to my body on a few different aspects in terms of relationships, in terms of like how much I can actually handle. And also, I wasn't honoring seasons coming to an end as they should. And like that points to some relationships. And so if I'm going to answer the question in a short way, like, how do I do it? Very messy and badly at times.
So real.
How could I improve? That comes with honestly just listening to my body more and admitting that I'm never the exception, ever.
I love that. I love that.
We get to a place where whether we are a teacher or, author, speaker or not, I think we get to a certain age and we have experience and we hear all of these things like about how important rest is, and I even read the Burnout book and I was like, okay, I see that your research points to that amount of rest is necessary. But for me, I was always looking for a reason that I was the exception. And that I think also comes from wanting to be the strong one, wanting to be the most resilient because I got praised for it growing up. So anyway, that was the sort of long explanation of the reasons that I did not listen to my body when I should have. And I will say this for the listeners, for what it's worth, it will catch up with you. You're not as strong as you think. I think physically, mentally, and emotionally, like we're not invincible is what I'm trying to say.
Yes. I don't know if I read the same Burnout book as you, but Anne Helen Peterson's book, it's called Burnout, How Millennials Became the Burnout Generation.
No, I read the Emily and Amelia Nagoski one.
Okay. And I do think that this is transferable to like so many generations, not just millennials. But one of the things that she talks about is like trying to outwork a broken system. And like, we're all convinced that we can. And we're like, I can be the exception. I can be the one. I can just put a little more muscle in, but we can't, right? If it's broken, none of us are going to be able to outwork it.
That's interesting. Like, well, then I want to kind of segue over there for a second because I was really moved by the article and I cannot remember the two amazing women that wrote the article for Harvard Business Review around imposter syndrome.
I love this article too.
Do you remember
Yes, it's Rucha Katolshian and Jodi Embury.
Okay, I remember she had a beautiful name, and I mentioned them actually in the revised version of one of my books. It really shined the light on the name of the article was like, Stop Calling It Imposter Syndrome or something like that. I'll link to it in the show notes, but it was about that, don't tell us we need to change when it's the system that's broken that wasn't ever made for women.
Yeah, I love this article too. I'm so glad that you love it as well. I think it's called Stop Telling Women We Have Imposter Syndrome.
Yes.
And exactly what you said. The essence is that we make it an individual problem. We're like, oh, women at work are broken, so you need to go do this work to fix yourself. And listen, like I said before, even around ambition, right? We all have stuff on our side of the street we need to look at. That's why you and I have jobs. And we're not the problem, right? We look around a room and we don't see people that look like us, and then we question our belonging. So the challenge is that you actually need to get more people in the room that look like us, so there's psychological safety, so we don't feel like we don't belong versus there's something inherently wrong with us. Plus, they say that it pathologizes a perfectly typical set of behaviors and feelings, right?
A perfectly applicable reaction to a situation or circumstance. Exactly. It really opened my eyes. And which brings me to a question for you. And you said something before we got on this conversation about how if someone is in corporate, sometimes it's not possible for them to attune to like, well, I'm on my period this week, so I am going to be too tired. I can't
Let me not deliver this.
Amazing. Right. I can't deliver this very important project. But I have had I do a lot of executive coaching, and I have talked to both men and women really about talking to their manager about, like, can you shift things around? And a lot of times that conversation is welcomed and compromises are made. So do you have any tips or strategies you can tell women who are in corporate environments who sometimes struggle with the way that the 40-hour work week is set up.
Yes, I love what you're saying because I think sometimes it is a conversation around boundaries, trade-offs, and then being able to communicate it effectively.
Yeah.
So if we are used to being the hardest working person in the room, we probably haven't set very many boundaries. We're probably doing a little bit more than we need to. So even before we align around our cycles and our energy, thinking about like, where am I overworking and overgiving? And are there some places that I could potentially make some trade-offs? Are there some other resources that could kind of take these pieces on? And then I don't know if you use this model, but this is one of my favorite models for a tough conversation. It comes from the Center for Creative Leadership, and it's called the SBIS model.
I don't know if I know that one. There's a Center for Creative Leadership right here in Greensboro, so I have a special place in my heart for them.
Oh, love. So basically, it stands for Situation, Behavior, Impact, Solution.
Okay.
So when we want to share something with our managers and we want to lay things out, so like, what's the situation? The situation is I have this really heavy workload. I'm tipping towards burnout. The behavior is I'm trying to be the person that like outworks this, but I'm noticing that I need a little more support. The impact of me not having support is that I'm tipping towards burnout, and actually my performance is suffering. And I think that I'll be able to do a better job and knock these things out of the park if we come up with some trade-offs together. So my request is we figure out a way to kind of resource this together. And what I love about it is it makes a tough conversation just linear and fact-based, because oftentimes it's so emotional and it's really hard to figure our way and find our way through them.
I love that. I do something similar with clients, and it really, I think if I could just emphasize it is about using I statements, and not blaming other people on your team or anyone like that. And also pitching a solution. Yeah. Instead of just saying, here's the problem.
Right.
Period.
Don't come to your manager with just problems.
No. Yes, I do that kind of work with clients as well. And so I wanted to also ask you, like, you address, whether you're talking about it or working with clients, the internalized beliefs that can lead people to equate their worth with their work. And I know that's a common problem among even my clients. So I know there's people listening who struggle with that. So how do you address that?
Core limiting beliefs work, and that's pretty foundational, and some shadow work too. So what are the core beliefs that we have about ourselves, about our self-esteem, about our worth in the world? What are the earliest memories that we have around these associations, right? For a lot of us, there's sort of a seminal moment where, we get a reward for the thing, and then we think we have to live that way. And so there's a real rewiring around the beliefs that needs to happen too. And in tandem with that, now I think we need to do so much nervous system work as well, right? Because nervous system drives the thoughts. And so 100%. We might kind of come across that original injury, and we might be able to kind of come up with some new affirmations and choose another way. But our nervous system needs to feel regulated around this other way as well.
I know that the conversation around core beliefs can feel a little bit kind of cliche self-help, but like, I'm still here for it. Like they matter. And reaching into your subconscious the best way that you can. And that's through breathwork, hypnotherapy. I'm very much a big proponent of psychedelic therapy. It can be so helpful. I want to add one more thing onto that, because I don't know if it gets talked about a lot, that sometimes our core beliefs can be shaped from experiences that we had, usually primary experiences where we were praised for something. And it was actually a good thing, like a good attribute or characteristic that we embodied. And then we lean into that so much. Yeah. So for one of my very first jobs that I had was at the Wet Seal at the mall. For any of you who are old enough, I don't even know if those exist anymore. I think there's a few Wet Seals. I don't know if they do,
but that's a throwback.
It is a throwback. I also worked at Contempo Casuals later on down the line, but Wet Seal was my first job. And I remember, and no one ever taught me this, I just sort of knew that I had to walk in and ask for an application with confidence. And not to be meek or quiet, so, and that wasn't hard for me to kind of put that on. So I squared my shoulders and I walked in and I asked the person at the cashier's desk for an application. And then after I got hired, the manager told me that she remembered me. I didn't get the application from her, but she was there at the cash wrap and she noticed me and hired me because of that first impression.
Wow.
She didn't even really care about the interview. She was like, the way that you walked in. And I was like, oh, it worked. Wow. It worked. So that cemented in me. And I was like, okay, the way for me to be successful, the way for me to get what I want is for me to like square up and just like tits up and do that. And I think that it wasn't always necessarily a bad thing. However, it secured a belief in me that if I don't show up that way all of the time, bad shit's going to go down. It pushed me to never, kind of like the never let him see you sweat type of thing, like to not ever show any kind of, like that I was exhausted or that I couldn't do it, or if I had to like cancel a day of calls because I just was a mess. Don't do that. That was detrimental. So I give that example because sometimes that can happen. It's not necessarily always a bad core belief.
100%. I think that's such a beautiful example. And also sometimes they can happen vicariously too, right? Somebody could watch you have that experience and then decide the same thing and move that way too.
Yeah. It can really pull us away from just being human.
Yeah, exactly. And we feel like we have to live into this mythic version of ourselves, but
yes,
we all have good days and we all have challenging days.
We do. Okay. We need to take one more ad break. When we get back, I want to hear more about your story around your personal experience and how you got here. So we'll be right back.
The new McCrispy Strip is here. Dip approved by ketchup, tangy barbecue, honey mustard, Sprite, McFlurry, Big Mac sauce, double dipped in buffalo and ranch, more ranch, and creamy chili McCrispy Strip Dip. Now at McDonald's. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso and Samra Origins by The Weekend Coffee Collection.
Introducing Samra Origins. My collaboration with Nespresso is a connection to my roots, to my mother, Samra. Coffee that hits the right notes. It transports you. Crafted with unique notes and bold, soaring flavors. Experience a taste that moves you. Nespresso and Samra Origins.
Discover more at Nespresso.com.
Get into your body's vitals with the Vitals app on Apple Watch.
I wanna get into my body and then my skin do the talking. I wanna feel like I'm myself again.
The Vitals app tracks key overnight metrics so you can spot changes in your health before you feel them. The Vitals app on Apple Watch. iPhone XS or later required. The Vitals app is for wellness purposes only and not for medical use.
I wanna get into my body.
Okay, so you talked about that you got a diagnosis with 2 autoimmunes that sort of set your life in a different motion. So, I mean, I waited until I was 45 to get my one. And so can you tell us what happened? Like what trajectory were you on that got you there?
Yes, I was girl bossing real hard.
Okay, a little too close to the sun?
A little too close to the sun, yes. So I am the child of immigrants and, learned very early on, be the hardest working person in the room, be the first one in, the last one out, no boundaries, deeply codependent, all of the fun signatures. And I carried that way of being into work. It worked in school, right? I was like, okay, I put all this in and I get this great output, but the world of work was a little bit different. And so I was in my late 20s and I had co-founded a marketing agency and I was working like 60, 70-hour work weeks. And, I didn't know anything about leadership or management at the time, right? It was kind of like my first managerial role and was just putting everybody ahead of myself, like my clients, my employees, everybody but me. And then, I started to get some symptoms and there was like whispers, but I never listened to the whispers. I was the muscle through kind of person. As you do. And then finally, I got a little shout from the universe. So I had started to feel really sick. But the thing that sent me to the doctor was my hair was falling out. And I had this like big bald spot right in the front and was like, this is no good.
It was right in the front?
Right in the front.
Oh, the universe was trying to tell you.
It. Literally. It was like something she's got to see.
Yeah.
They had to hit me over the head with it. So then I go to 7 different doctors because like similar to you, medical gaslighting is real, right? Yep. And it takes us a minute to be taken seriously.
Did you start to gaslight yourself?
I did. I was like,
so did I.
Okay, so listen to this. I think this is part of what happened. I love this reflection. You just made me understand it in a different way. So finally, I go to the 7th doctor. She's awesome. She gets me. She's wonderful. And I'm driving to work on a Friday and she calls and she says, where are you? And I'm like, I'm going to work. And she's like, if you don't go to the hospital now, instead of going to your client, you'll be days away from multiple organ failure.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I'd gotten so sick. I literally was like about to exit the planet. But I was so disassociated at that point that, and maybe it was also part of the medical gaslighting too, of like me not believing this. Yeah. I went to work.
Yeah.
And then like throughout the day, I was like, maybe I shouldn't be here. Maybe I should go to the hospital, like she said. But it was such a wild story. And like even the part about not going to the hospital right away, I'm like, there was so much happening in my mind and I was not embodied in what was actually taking place.
It's amazing what our minds do to protect us from certain situations. It sounds like you kind of got eased into it. It was like, we're going to just take a slow route to this realization.
Yeah, it took me a minute to land, that's for sure.
What would you mind telling us what your 2 diagnoses were?
Yes, I was diagnosed with celiac disease and Hashimoto's.
Okay. All right. So fellow Hashimoto's over here. Mine was negative for celiac, which I'm grateful because I know that one, but I also know that you're more likely to get any other autoimmune, which could be MS or lupus or any of them. If you have
yes,
one.
they like to go in pairs.
They
Hopefully
do.
Yes.
Buddy system.
Exactly. Accountability partners. I don't know.
I can't wait to see what my other one is. Yeah.
No, hopefully it bypasses you.
Yeah. It's interesting. I was just interviewing someone else and she was citing some research about how women are so much more, like statistically, so much more likely to have an autoimmune than men are. And there's some theories out there that it has to do with our emotional burden that we carry a lot of times and the system and how it wasn't made for us.
Yes, that's what I read too. Like the emotional labor that we do and the invisible labor really wears on us to the point that has higher autoimmune expression. It's wild.
In our personal life and at work as well. It's not just in personal life. Like it happens at work a lot too, in leadership positions and all positions. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. So I am wondering, before we close up, is there anything that you want to circle back to underscore, or to make mention of that's new in order for you to feel complete before we're done?
I think like the big takeaway from the book, and that I just want to underscore for everyone, is that ambition is neutral and natural. It's for all of us and it's ours for the taking. So many of us, like women, people of color, people with disabilities, the queer community, we experience an ambition penalty, right? We're often told that our ambition isn't polite and it's aggressive or whatever it is, right? And so I just want to invite you to come back to the conversation, to make it neutral and natural for you and find your way in it. And if it doesn't look like what we've seen in the world, brava, because like it needs to look different because so much of what we've seen is dysfunctional. But I really hope that you will find your way in it and that you do feel like anything is possible with your ambition when it's coming from that place of purpose and wholeness.
I love that so much. Thank you. From a place of purpose and wholeness. So Amina, can you tell us where to go to learn more about your work? I know that the book is called The Ambition Trap. We will link to that in the show notes, but is there anywhere specific you want people to go to?
Thank you so much. So you can get the book everywhere you buy books, whether that's your favorite local bookstore or a national chain. And then you can learn more about me on my website, AminaAlTai.com. I'm sure the spelling will be in the show notes.
Yes, it will. Easy peasy for people to click on. Again, The Ambition Trap. Thank you so much for being here. And listeners, thank you so much for your time. I know that it is a non-renewable resource, and I'm grateful that you choose to spend it with me and my guests. And remember, it's our life's journey to make ourselves better humans and our life's responsibility to make the world a better place. Bye for now. Hey, did you know there's free secret podcast episodes waiting for you that are not part of my regular podcast feed? Yes, AndreaOwen.com/free. And you just sign up. You get a link sent to you. It's very secret. It's like a secret club. We don't have a secret handshake. Don't worry about that. But it's these motivating podcast episodes that I made for you. They're under 20 minutes each. There's 3 of them. They're for wherever you are in your life. So head on over there and grab them. They range from really supporting you and seeing you where you are and being compassionate, all the way to giving you a giant kick in your ass and telling you how amazing and gorgeous and phenomenal you are. So AndreaOwen.com/free and get your hands on that free podcast feed.